Hey everyone, welcome back to the Prop Professor YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be going through a tutorial video on how to properly utilize the Alt Fantasy Optimizer here at Prop Professor. This tool shows you how to find plus EV bets on DFS apps that use multipliers, dynamic odds, and even boosted payouts. So without further ado, let's go ahead, jump on over to the Alt Fantasy Optimizer and dive right in. Alright guys, so I've pulled up the Alt Fantasy Optimizer here at Prop Professor, and to find this on our website, you simply go to your nav bar. On the far left, underneath Fantasy, you will see Alt Optimizer. Once you click on this Alt Optimizer, this is exactly what you will see and how the Alt Optimizer will display. Now you do have the ability to change this to card view, but throughout the duration of this video, I will be displaying the Alt Fantasy Optimizer in its table view. Once in table view, the Alt Fantasy Optimizer displays very similar to our Fantasy Optimizer, where we compare sportsbook lines directly back to various DFS apps. But the Alt Fantasy Optimizer is not your standard pick'em tool. It's designed for DFS apps that don't use traditional fixed payouts like Prize Picks. Now yes, Underdog and Dabble do have fixed payouts for the most part, but they also have multiplier-based payouts that are available on their platforms. So every single DFS app that is available on the Alt Fantasy Optimizer uses either dynamic odds, multiplier-based payouts, or boosted slip payouts. And the whole purpose of this tool is to help translate all of that back into a displaying EV percentage to show value on specific player props. In short, it's doing the back-end math to show you which picks are profitable, no matter how weird the payout structure may be. Now let's go ahead and start and talk about the DFS apps that use dynamic odds. So these sites are the most straightforward and operate almost exactly like a sportsbook. And these are going to be Hot Streak, Sleeper, Parlay Play, and Boom Fantasy. In each case, the odds listed on the apps are decimal odds, and a bet can be placed by simply taking two props and including them into a parlay. So for instance, Matthew Boyd under 17.5 pitching outs right now has a displaying odds of 2.5 times on Hot Streak. So this 2.5 times displaying odds on Hot Streak is actually equivalent to plus 150 odds. Now, as you saw, we display all of this information for you on the Alt Fantasy Optimizer, but if you're ever curious and want to actually figure out what a multiplier on one of these DFS apps and what the odds actually is for that specific leg, all you have to do is go down to Resources under Calculators, go to Odds Converter, and simply put in the displaying decimal or multiplier that you're getting on a DFS app. So for that Matthew Boyd under 17.5 pitcher outs, we were getting a displaying odds of a 2.5 times multiplier, which you can see is equivalent to plus 150 odds on a sportsbook. So again, we display all this information for you, but if the conversion from decimal to American odds is unclear, we offer an odds converter on our calculators page, like I mentioned, directly under the Resources tab. To recap, for the DFS apps that use dynamic odds that are very straightforward and operate like a sportsbook, so Hot Streak, Sleeper, Boom Fantasy, and Parlay Play, here's what the Alt Fantasy Optimizer does. It takes the displaying multiplier shown in the app, it converts it into American odds, it then compares that directly to real sportsbook odds and calculates the expected value of that play. Now let's go ahead and jump into a couple of the more trickier apps on the Alt Fantasy Optimizer, which are Underdog, DraftKings Pick 6, and Dabble. Betting alternate lines on these DFS apps is not straightforward and must be done carefully, but luckily for you, we do all the math for you on the back end on the Alt Fantasy Optimizer. The conversion between listed odds in each site and implied American odds is not remotely intuitive. Let's go ahead and talk about this Spencer Torkelson over 1.5 HRR with a displaying odds of 1.11 times on Underdog as our example. So let's imagine we're building out a 3-pick non-insured slip on Underdog, which normally pays out 6 times your money if you hit all 3 player props. But if one of these players has a 1.11 times multiplier, it means that your payout is boosted. So instead of getting 6 times, it's now 6.66 times. So instead of getting our normal plus 500 payout, it now turns into a plus 566 payout because of our one player prop that has a 1.11 times multiplier. Now here's the kicker. The value on this 1.11 times multiplier actually depends on how many picks are in our slip. A two-man non-insured slip has a worse implied odds per leg at minus 136 odds than a three-man power, which is minus 122 odds. So if an alt prop or one with a multiplier is included in a two-man power, the implied odds are actually worse than if it were included into a three-man power. So again, we have a three-man uninsured slip on Underdog that typically gives us a 6 times payout. We have one player prop that has a 1.11 times multiplier. So because we're including this instead of a base prop, the payout would be 6.66 times, or plus 566 American odds for our total parlay. When displaying odds on the Alt Fantasy Optimizer, our site assumes that slips are being included using the optimal slip type for that specific DFS app. So you'll notice if I go up here and click on Set Slip Type, it automatically defaults to Underdog's best slip type that they offer on their platform, which is a 6-pick insured slip. You can change the slip type from the Set Slip Type menu, which will change the odds and EV accordingly, and this is very important. So because we know a 2-pick non-insured slip gives you worse odds per leg than a 6-pick insured slip, please make sure that when you're building out slips using the Alt Fantasy Optimizer, you're updating your slip type based on the amount of legs you're putting into your specific slip. Some player props that may display at close to a 13% EV in a 6-pick insured slip may only be 4% EV if playing in a 2-pick non-insured slip. Last but not least, we've made it to the Betr alt types on the Alt Fantasy Optimizer, and Betr manages to take the cake when it comes to being as confusing as possible with Alt Fantasy implied odds. So confusing that we actually gave it its own drop-down menu. Betr currently has 5 types of alt props that they offer, which can be added into slips. We have super boosted, which are 3 yellow bars. We have boosted, which are 2 yellow bars. We have mini boosted, which is 1 yellow bar. We have edge 1, which is blue and 1 bar. And we have edge 2, which is blue and 2 bars. These alt props do not correspond to any set implied decimal or multiplier odds, making them very confusing. When you're on the Betr app, the only way to know what your payout may be when using them is to build out a slip. Now again, fortunately for our users, we've done the math for them on the back end. To achieve optimal EV when entering Betr alt slips, you should exclusively combine the same alt type in non-insured slips. For example, one super boosted prop should only be entered in a slip with other super boosted props, and those slips should always be non-insured. From here, the odds vary depending on the number of legs in each parlay. Similar to the previous batch of alt books, the optimal slip type is default selected and the EV and odds correspond to that slip type. If you wish to change your slip type, you can do so by selecting the Set Slip Type menu, which will change the EV and the odds accordingly depending on what slip you actually check off. So again, when it comes to Betr and their alt player props, the Alt Fantasy Optimizer breaks this down by deconstructing the actual boost, calculating the implied odds for each leg depending on what slip and what boosts you're actually using, and as always compares it to the sportsbook pricing. This then allows our users to find the most profitable boosted player props on Betr. Now that we've covered the various DFS apps that actually populate to the Alt Fantasy Optimizer and how each one of them works, let's go ahead and jump into our filters and the different settings that we can put on the Alt Fantasy Optimizer. Now to get to my settings, I simply click my settings button right here, and this will display my basic settings and my advanced settings. Similar to our other tools, you have the ability with basic settings to set things like min and max odds, min value and max value, min hours away and max hours away, the different fantasy apps that you want to display to this specific tool, and the specific player props from these specific sports that you want to display to this tool as well. Now that we've covered our basic settings, let's jump into our advanced settings. All right, so let's talk about comparison weights and how to control which sports books are used to show value on the optimizer. Here at Prop Professor, we let you set rules for which books should be used when comparing fantasy props to sportsbook lines. This is super helpful if you only trust certain books, or if you want to make sure a prop is backed by enough sharp data before it even shows up. Let's go ahead and run through a quick example together. Up top, I've added my min weight to 2, my market types to player props, and I've added all the leagues that I want player props to populate from. And here at the bottom, I've added 3 different books by simply clicking the Add Book button: FanDuel, DraftKings, and Caesars. You can assign a weight for each sports book. For example, if you give FanDuel, DraftKings, and Caesars a weight of 1, and you set your minimum total weight to 2, then a player prop will only show up if at least 2 of those 3 books have odds available for that market. So if you add these 3 books with a 1 weight, you're basically saying only show me player props on the optimizer where at least 2 of these 3 books that I believe are sharp in the player prop market actually have odds for that specific player prop. So essentially, it helps filter out weak or unsupported props from sportsbooks you don't trust. Now, there's also an option to mark a sportsbook as required. If you check required, that means the book must have odds available for that prop in order for it to show up. So to sum it up, weights let you control how many books you need to agree before a player prop is even shown on the optimizer. And marking a book as required gives you even more control over how strict that comparison has to be. It's one of the best ways to make sure the props you're seeing on the optimizer are backed by enough high quality data. And that, my friends, is the breakdown on how to properly utilize the Alt Fantasy Optimizer here at Prop Professor.